to Relentless. Today we're going to carry on with our Soul Survivor theme. Enjoy!
Come set your rule and reign in our hearts again. Increase in us, we pray. Unveil why we're made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope, like wildfire in our very souls. Holy Spirit, come invade us now. We are your church. We need your power in us. We seek your kingdom first. We hunger and we thirst. Refuse to waste our lives, for you're our joy and prize. To see the captive hearts released, the hurt, the sick, the poor at peace. We lay down our lives for heaven's cause. We are your church. We pray, revive this earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Unleash your kingdom's power, reaching the near and far. No force of hell can stop your beauty changing hearts. You made us for much more than this. Awake the kingdom seed in us. Fill us with the strength and love of Christ. We are your church. We are the home on earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Peace, you bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still, you call the seas to still, the rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe. You call these bones to live. You call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. We lift up the name of Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. 'Cause your name is the light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is the light and forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. 'Cause your name is the light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is the light and forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. I'm caught in the fire, no escape or no return. I'm ready for danger, light me up and let me burn. There's one name, one power that makes me come alive. I'm exploding into life. I'm gonna lift my hands, lift them into the light. Jesus, I'm gonna lift my hands, lift them into the light. See, Lord, I'm gonna lift my hands,
Summer. 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 Lid. Lid. Jess. Faith.
Kiki, do you love me? Beside me, and I need you. I'm down for you.
Faith. Faith. Summer. Rachel. Rachel.
He's cute. No, he's cute.
Summer. Summer.
Maybe. Today, M&M costume.
Oh yeah.
That's my dad. That's my teacher. Gooseberry. That's my teacher.
This morning, I want to speak initially a bit about a topic that has been a bit of a theme this week so far, I think. And that is the subject of shame. Now, shame is something that we talk about, but we don't necessarily spend a lot of time exploring. So shame is this sense that something is wrong, that something somewhere is wrong, and it makes you want to run away and hide. Okay, and I have quite a lot of experience of this emotion in my life. Mainly through wardrobe malfunctions. Now, a wardrobe malfunction is when something you're wearing something goes wrong with it, and you end up exposing yourself to the person in front of you, and they end up seeing more of you than you would want them to see, or they would want to see as well. I will give you some examples. A little while ago, I was at this big Christian event, massive conference in London, and I was wearing a skirt with an elasticated waistband, and I was stood talking to some guys, and I bent down to pick this box up, and I was wearing these shoes as well, I remember that now. As I bent down, this heel went onto the skirt, I stood up, and my skirt, yes, stayed exactly where it was. And I was stood there with this box in front of me, trying to cover myself, feeling so embarrassed and so ashamed. All I could do was try and wriggle my skirt up without these guys noticing. And as soon as my skirt was up, I ran and I hid because I was so embarrassed. The other thing that happened to me that was really awful, I mean, there's been a number, and I don't know how I did this, but I managed to go to work with my dress completely undone. Now, in my defense, I had a zip down the side of my dress that I didn't notice, and it was a really hot day. So I got dressed in the morning, I put like a massive denim jacket on over the top, went into my office, took off my coat, put it on the chair. And as I did that, the windows in our office were open because it was so hot. The wind blows through the office, and I just feel air here moving in places that it shouldn't move. And I was too terrified to look down. There were two men in front of me. I just looked one of them in the eye, and he just said, yes. And I was so embarrassed. I grabbed my coat, I covered myself, and I ran into the toilets, and I did not come out there for quite a long time. I was so ashamed. I am used to these moments of shame, okay? But what I want to talk about this morning is not just shame that is a moment, but shame that is a state that we live in. So, let's kind of try to get our head around what shame actually is. So shame, it's not the same as embarrassment. So being embarrassed, you go a bit red, you feel a bit awkward, but the moment passes. Shame is not the same as humiliation. Humiliation, you feel small, you feel hurt, you feel stupid and insignificant, and it's painful. but again, humiliation passes. Now, this is the really important one. Shame is not the same as guilt. You see, guilt is about what you did. Shame is about who you are. So guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, something is wrong with me. And it's that piece of shame that I want to spend some time looking at this morning. You see, the difficulty with shame is you can't spot it. It's not easy. Like embarrassment, you can spot. Shame isn't necessarily a behavior, but it causes a behavior to happen. And what I mean by that is think about shame like the wind, okay? So the wind blows through that door, comes in here, and blows over this lectern. And you might point at this lectern and go, is that wind? And you go, no, that's a lectern. However, the wind caused that lectern to fall over. And that's how shame operates in our lives. So, for example, maybe the voice of shame, this voice that says you're not good enough, speaks over you. You are not loved. You are unlovable. And so the behavior that you see out of that voice is that maybe someone goes from relationship to relationship to relationship, trying to cover over that voice of shame. Does that make sense? I'm going to take your stunned silence as a massive yes, it does, and move on. Is that okay? So, we want to look at shame. And the idea of shame, this concept of shame in humanity has existed since the beginning of time. It's always been there, sewn into our DNA, sewn into our fabric. So, if you have a Bible, it's going to come up on the screen. We're going to spend a couple of minutes in Genesis. So this is Genesis 2, verses 21. Then we're going to read down into chapter 3. Then I'm going to skip a whole bunch and read you 2 more verses. Okay, so what's happened here is God has just made the world. He has made like rivers and dogs and people, just Adam, and he's about to make his second person, Eve. And this is where we swing in. So this is Genesis 2, verse 21. Here we go. So, the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. While the man slept, the Lord God took out one of the man's ribs and closed up the opening. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib, and he brought her to the man. At last, the man exclaimed, "This one is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken from man." This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife. The two are united into one. Okay, if you've switched off, listen to this verse. Zone back in. Now, the man and his wife were both naked, so they're vulnerable, they're exposed, but they felt no shame. The serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. One day he asked the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden?" "Well, of course we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden," the woman replied. "It's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we're not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or even touch it, and if you do, you will die." "You won't die," the serpent replied to the woman. "God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil." Well, the woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. And then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. Okay, if you've zoned out, zone back in again. Here we go. At that moment, their eyes were opened, and suddenly they felt shame at their nakedness. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. This is verse 20. Then the man Adam named his wife Eve, because she will be the mother of all who live. And the Lord God made clothing from animal skins for Adam and his wife. Do you see? There is a moment at the beginning of time where we felt no shame. And then something happens. There's this break in our relationship with God, and all of a sudden we are covered in shame. And what's our response? We try to cover it. We sew some fig leaves together and we stick them on ourselves to try and cover our own shame. And we have been trying to cover our own shame ever since. Do you know the original word for shame, it's kind of like a Danish word, skam. And that word literally means to cover. Shame covers us, and we try and cover our shame, and that is how we operate. But shame wasn't always meant to be a bad thing, okay? So I need to give you an illustration here. So, if you imagine, right, I have a little girl with me just here. Just imagine her. And shame is supposed to teach this little girl boundaries and what is right and what is wrong. So if this is a really busy main road and there's cars going up and down, and I say to this little girl, "Hey, don't go anywhere near this road, because if you do, you're going to get really hurt." Or imagine there's a garden, and then there's a tree in the middle of the garden, and there's some fruit that you're not supposed to eat, okay? A boundary is put in place. Now, this little girl, because it's an illustration, runs out towards this road. What am I going to do? Right, yeah, I'm going to shout. I'm going to stop her. No, stop, come back. And the moment I cry out, she's covered in shame because she knows that something is wrong. However, shame was never meant to end there. You see, there was meant to be a second part to this, a part where your relationship is restored, a part where things come full circle. So the girl runs towards the road. I go to the girl and say, don't go into the road again. If you go into the road, you're going to get hurt, and I don't want you to be hurt because I care about you and I love you. You're forgiven, but please don't do it again. And the shame subsides because she knows why she shouldn't have done that thing. And she knows that she's loved, and she knows that she's forgiven. Now, in the Garden of Eden, what happened is we crossed a boundary. But the moment we crossed a boundary, our relationship with God was broken. And so that second bit, that restoration piece, it never took place. And so ever since then, we've just been left with this sense that something is wrong, covered in our own shame, until God came to earth in the form of Jesus, died on a cross, and reconciled humanity back to himself, taking our shame away. You see, if you are in a relationship with Jesus here this morning, you have no shame. You are shameless. Why? Because Jesus took it on the cross. So, how does shame work for us? Well, I mentioned just now that we create coverings for shame, okay? So we have this voice of shame in our heads, maybe telling us that we're unloved, and we create coverings for that voice to try and quieten it down through behavior. Let me give you a really practical example. I said my lovely husband is in this morning, Andy. He's the next gen pastor in our church. So I get to hang out with some really cool young people during the week. And one of the things we do is that we run a Friday night drop-in. Now, one of the Friday nights, just before the summer holidays, there was this moment where a group of girls came running through our youth club in tears. And that actually happens quite a lot. They're quite dramatic. But this one time, this girl looked really upset. So I went up to her. I'm going to call her Lily. I said, hey, Lily, are you okay? What's wrong? Yeah, I'm fine, nothing. Okay, well, I'm just going to be over there if you want to chat. So 10 minutes later, Lily comes back to me. I said, actually, yeah, can we have a chat? So me and another youth worker take her into a room. We sit her down. She's still sobbing. I said, hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? She said, there's this girl, and she keeps saying things about me. She's saying really horrible things. And, you know, I don't really mind that she's saying these things. But the things that she's saying make this voice in my head louder. I said, okay, well, what does that voice in your head say? Every morning I wake up, and there's a voice in my head that tells me I'm disgusting. And what that girl is saying is making that voice louder, and I don't know how to cope. Do you hear that voice of shame? There is something wrong with you. You are disgusting. And the way that Lily had tried to cover that voice of shame was a few different ways. For her, she cut herself. So as she was speaking to me, there was blood running down her wrist. She was also really extrovert. She would try and cover the voice of shame by just being really loud, by having the right clothes, by guys finding her attractive, by not eating properly so that she felt thinner. She found ways to try and cover that voice of shame in her life. And so I wonder, what's your covering? What does shame speak over your life? And how do you try to cover that up? So maybe for some of us, it is that voice that we are unloved, and we go from relationship to relationship to relationship to try and cover that over. Or maybe it's the opposite, and it's a bit more of what Andy mentioned last night, in terms of actually, you try and keep people at a distance. You try not to let people too close. Because if you don't let people too close, then they can never let you down and disappoint you, and that voice saying that you're unloved can't get any louder. Or maybe it's that you're not good enough. And so you have worked super hard in your exams for your whole life because you know that if you could just get that grade, if you could just have that mark against your name, that it would show your parents, it would show your friends, and it would show you that you are worth something and you are good enough. And for a season, that voice will be quieter. Or maybe it's that you're not good enough, but that makes you really competitive. So you look at all your friends around you and you think, well, as long as I'm better than them, then it's okay. Or maybe that voice tells you that you're a failure, or you're a disappointment, or that you're disgusting. What is that voice of shame, and how do you try and cover that voice up? You know, for some of us, shame is a moment. For some of us, shame is a state. But for some of us, shame is our existence. And there will be people in this room who have been through horrendous things. People have done stuff to you or spoken stuff over you. And shame is not just a state, but it is your identity. And you cannot see yourself beyond that voice of shame, that you are not good enough, that you are a failure, that you are somehow not okay. Do you know that shame will cover us until it buries us if we let it? The stats linking a strong sense of shame in yourself to poor mental health, to anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, the stats linking the two are off the charts. But this morning, I want to say to you that you were not created for that. You were created for so much more. You were created for freedom. And I also want to say to you that you are not on your own. You see, we all have a voice of shame. It's just varying volumes. For me, I have one. My voice of shame tells me that I'm not good enough. And it's always been there. And when I was younger, I would cover it by bathing myself in fake tan and wearing lots and lots of makeup. As I've got older, it's changed slightly. My covering has changed. I will go into really exciting meetings in my job. And even coming here and speaking to you guys at Soul Survivor, there's a voice in my head that says, you are not good enough. And someone will find that out. And someone will realize that you don't know what you're doing and you're making it all up as you go along. And then what are you going to do? But do you know, the more I get to know Jesus, the closer I get to him, the easier it is to spot those lies. So, if you're a Christian, if you follow Jesus, our shame has been taken away. So how is it that those lies, that voice of shame, still feels so real? I want to tell you a little story. So, many of you guys, I'm imagining, have been coming to Soul Survivor for years, right? Some of you guys have born here or something. Right, so you guys know how the day works. You get up, you maybe go to a seminar, you come here, you'll have lunch, hang out this afternoon, maybe go to some more seminars, go to the thing tonight, maybe do after hours, then you'll go to sleep, and you think that that's all that happens. For some of your youth leaders, they will know that that is not all that happens. Oh yeah, now you're interested because you think you've been missing out. Okay, so I want to tell you about my youth group. So in our youth group, when we take our youth group away, what we do is we set a bedtime, a kind of curfew. So you go to after hours, but you've got to be back at campsite by a certain time. And there's a time you've got to be back with us. Then there's a time that you've got to be in your tents getting ready for bed. And then there's a time that you've got to be asleep. We know you're not actually asleep, you're just pretending, but we just roll with it. So what we do on those nights is that we form a rota. So some of our youth workers each night stay up and have to make sure that everybody's back safe. And this is really when we do our best youth work. You see, what we do is there's a few of us that they think that we're just sitting around having a drink. However, we deploy our quietest youth workers and they sneak out to the edge of the tents of the young people who are talking loudly because you forget that your tents are only made out of material. And we just sit there and we listen. And we find out who you fancy, and we find out who's been doing your head in, and we find out what you think of the youth team, and we find out where you were at when you said you were at that seminar today, but you were actually meeting someone you fancied. We find out all those things. Sometimes we even take our phones and we take notes so that we can report back to the rest of the youth team. Yes, we do. Oh, man. Youth workers, if you've not been doing it, you really need to start. It's a win. Now, yeah, now you're worried, aren't you? Yo, I see it. So, right, the best one. I've got to tell you our best one. It happened at Soul Survivor B last year. I was on, right? It was my turn. I was rotated on. I was part of the quiet team. So, I sneak out. I creep up to the edge of the tent of these three lads. Oh, this is brilliant. And I got down just in time to hear one of them go, and if anyone ever finds that out, I will die of embarrassment. Well, I know I'm onto a winner. So he has no idea that I didn't hear what was going on. Well, now that we've covered that, gentlemen, it's probably time you go to sleep, isn't it? Oh my gosh, absolute scenes in the tent. They're like, oh, I can't believe she heard that. I'm so embarrassed. I'm going to die. So after about 25 minutes of them stressing out and kicking off, they go to sleep. I'm delighted with myself. The next morning, right, this lad gets out of his tent and he clocks me across the campsite. He sees me. And his entire demeanor changes. He sees me and his shoulders slump. He's really awkward. He can't look at me. He's like, all right. He can't look me in the eye. And he still doesn't know that I don't know. So I was like, you all right, Elliot? How's it going? Yeah. And all through the week, I just wait until he was okay. And then I go, so the tent, Elliot, yeah. And he would just change again. And he would be embarrassed and not know what to do with himself. He didn't know that I had absolutely nothing on him. But what I really enjoyed is that I could drop something in there that was a complete lie, and he would just, his whole posture would change. Do you know, he didn't know that I didn't know until about 3 weeks ago when I asked that I was going to tell this story. I asked his permission. He was so mad. So, do you know, in that story, ladies and gentlemen, I played the role of Satan. Yes, I did. You see, what he does, Satan has absolutely nothing on you if you follow Jesus, and he knows it. But what he will do is he'll just fire lies at you, and he'll watch what you do. And if he sees a reaction, then he'll fire some more, because he realizes that you don't know how free you are, and so he can throw whatever lies at you he wants. Guys, you were created for freedom. There's a great quote I love that says, some people think that freedom is not getting found out, but true freedom is not having to hide. And that is what Jesus wants for your life. Total freedom. Total freedom so that you do not have to hide or feel ashamed. Why? Because Jesus reestablished the connection. Jesus said it all straight. Do you remember in that passage, Adam and Eve sewed leaves together, fig leaves to wear? Now, I don't know if you've ever tried wearing leaves for a long period of time. I mean, I haven't. But that was never going to work. That was never a good plan. Us covering our own shame is never going to be successful. And so what happened? In the garden, God took an animal, a completely innocent animal, and he sacrificed it. Its blood was shed so that humanity's shame could be covered. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years later, Jesus walks the earth. He's completely innocent, and he's sacrificed and killed. His blood is shed so that the shame of humanity can be covered. Why? Why would he do that? He does it because he loves you. And he wants you to be free. But if you take one thing away from this morning, I want it to be this. He doesn't just love you. He loves this entire world. The reason that the lies seem so powerful is because the enemy really, really wants you to feel shame. Because as long as you feel a sense of shame over your life, your eyes are going to be focused on you. I'm just not worthy. I'm just not worth it. I'm just not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm broken. I'm hurting. And as long as our eyes are on us, our eyes aren't on a broken and hurting world. And I believe that this morning Jesus wants to say, lift your eyes. There's a world that desperately needs Jesus. And while we are covered in our own shame and caught up in that, our eyes are going to be on us and not on them. Okay, I need someone's help just for a moment. Could I have a volunteer who, hang on, you don't know what I'm going to ask yet. I need somebody who isn't a vegetarian, has no food allergies. Okay, lady, black t-shirt. Could you bring with you 3 friends who also aren't vegetarians and have no food allergies? And could you come up to the stage, so just in the corner over here? Guys, just that corner over there, is that all right? Great, so if you could come around, give them a round of applause. Now, as they come up, I want to know, if you guys have a similar problem to the one that I have. So this is a sharer pack, right? I have an issue with sharer packs because I will take a sharer pack and I will consume it myself, right? So in our household, we got through... this actually wasn't me. My husband got through 2 sharer bars of caramel chocolate in 2 days over the weekend. Yeah, right. I love you. I'm sorry. I love you. I can eat a tub of Pringles at a time. Anyone else? Tub of Pringles, Doritos. My personal weakness, Jaffa cakes. I can get, yeah, I know, right? Like 13 Jaffa cakes in one go. It's like it's how they were designed to be eaten. Thank you so much, guys. Right. Can I have you at this end? Is that okay? You guys stay there, if that's all right. If you come up here. What's your name?
My name's Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay. Really nice to meet you. Friends of Lindsay. Right, Lindsay, could you hold these for me for a moment and stand with your friends? Right. So Lindsay has got this sharer pack of marshmallows. Now, I want you to imagine that Lindsay has made a decision to follow Jesus. And what happens when Lindsay has chosen to follow Jesus is that, now bear with me here, God hands her a massive sharer pack of marshmallows, okay? And in this sharer pack is like total forgiveness, freedom from shame, freedom from guilt. Help yourself, yeah, eat some. It's knowing God personally, the ability to pray, peace that goes beyond all understanding, the gifts of the Spirit. The gifts of the Spirit and the fruits of the Spirit, all this stuff. Now, Lindsay eats her marshmallows. What we do often as Christians is we sit there and we eat our marshmallows. We're like, yeah, good, love some marshmallows. And we just eat them. It's the equivalent of maybe coming here this week, experiencing God in an incredible way, and going back and just having a nice time with it and not sharing it with anyone. We just eat, and we become spiritually fat Christians. Now, you keep eating those marshmallows, Lindsay, you're doing a great job. These ladies here are Lindsay's friends from school, right? And these girls are spiritually starving, okay? So maybe one of them, their parents are going for a breakup, and she desperately needs to know God as a father who won't let her down. Maybe somebody else has crippling anxiety and needs a God of peace that will transform her life. Maybe someone else has just failed all their exams and needs to know a God that gives them hope and a plan and a purpose. Now, Lindsay very kindly just now offered her friends the marshmallows. Please, hand them out. Let these girls eat them. Now, this is what's supposed to happen, okay? Your friends back at home are spiritually starving and throwing your spirituality on the floor. Oh, okay. You might need to share your spirituality around a little bit more. Okay. Sometimes someone steals Jesus from you. Are you gonna share those out? No. The moral of the story is, don't be like Mike. You see, this is what it's meant to be, guys. God has given you so much, and yet we keep our eyes fixed on ourselves. We sit there eating our marshmallow while our world is spiritually starving. Share your marshmallows. Can you give these guys a round of applause? They've done really well. Keep the marshmallows, take them. Oh yeah, you get to keep those. Don't worry about that one. Guys, share your marshmallows. Do you know, today, people will die of starvation, while 1/3 of all fruit and veg is thrown away because it's ugly. People today will die because they don't have clean drinking water. There are people today who will risk their lives escaping a country because of war and persecution, because what faces them in risking their lives escaping is better than what they're risking staying. Your generation matters. In your generation, you have the chance to see an end to extreme poverty. You guys get to choose that. In your generation, we get to pick whether our world is in a lot of trouble with climate change or whether we can pull it back from the brink of humanity being in serious problems and serious trouble. You guys get to pick that. And Jesus cares about that world. He cares about your friends who don't know Jesus. He cares about your family who don't know Jesus. And we sit there eating our marshmallows because I'm pretty good at getting my way through a sharer pack. Well, guys, today I believe that God has called you to so much more. It is time that we step out out of our cover from our cover of shame, step out away from the shame that we've been trying to cover and step under the cover of Jesus and say, it is not about me, it is about him, and it is about a broken and hurting world. I'll finish where I started. For some of you, that might mean you changing the plans of your life entirely. And for some of you, it means putting your brave pants on, being really vulnerable with yourself, really vulnerable with God, and taking some risks. But I believe our world is too hurting and too broken for it to stay the way it is, and for us just to eat our marshmallows all to ourselves. I'm going to pray. Jesus, I thank you so much for the guys in this room. I thank you so much that you adore them. You adore them enough to die for them, that they are called to complete freedom. Freedom, not freedom of not being found out, God, but freedom in terms of not having to hide. And Jesus, I pray now that as we see what you want to do, you would help us step out of our cover of shame, to lift our eyes and see a world that you want transformed. Amen.